Welcome everybody, my name is Rainer, this is Rainier Books, this is BookTube you have tuned into, and today it's the time for Sunday, May the 7th, and it's time to give you a wrap-up of the books that I read last week, the book that I DNF'd, and the books that I'm going to read in the next week. The first book I DNF'd, is it possible, you ask yourself sometimes, is it really possible to DNF a book that has won the National Book Award? That's a rhetorical question because the answer is yes, of course you can. I DNF'd The Reportage by Tess Gunty. I DNF'd it today. I gave up after almost half of it, 150 pages, but I actually couldn't make it to the second half. The reason is I think this is a good book probably, but it's not a Rainier book. So the reason why I DNF'd it, this is a book about a bunch of totally different characters and people living in Vacaville, Indiana, and having a connection to Vacaville, Indiana, some of them. And Tess Gunty is telling this story in a lot of different kind of perspectives. She is telling different stories in different lines that in the end, I'm very sure about it, are all connected to each other and will find a beautiful and very interesting and very great culmination. But I simply did not like, sometimes it's too slow and sometimes it's too boring for me. I couldn't get through some passages of the book. Others I really liked. There are some descriptions here in the book that I liked and some stories. There's this character called Blandine. She's a very young girl and we know from the very beginning that she is going to die. It says here in the beginning, on the first page, it says, one hot night in apartment C4, Blandine Watkins exits her body. She's only 18 years old, but she has spent most of her life wishing for this to happen, because she has a connection to Hildegard von Bingen, a German mystic, a German nun of the about 1,000 years ago, when there was a lot of literature in Germany, German literature, where nuns were sort of fantasizing about sex mostly with Jesus, and having these mystic experiences. It's very hidden, it's not very obvious what they do, but I once did a seminar many years ago when I studied German literature. So she has this connection to Hildegard von Bingen. She wants to exit her body, she wants to go to another sphere, and she will, and something will happen to her. There are few reviews about this book, and I asked myself, why are there so few reviews about The Reportage? And it might be, or one of the reasons might be, that this is really hard to digest. As I say, it is very good written, but it's not written for me. Some other people, if you like form of books, if you are more into form than into actual plot or authentic and more realistic content, then this might be a very good book for you. I actually saw this review from Freshly Reads, and she is raving about this book. She loved it a lot, although she's also talking about the different kinds of lines and threads that this book has, and that it might be confusing. It was too confusing for me. I'm a simple guy. Maybe I'm a meat and potatoes kind of reader. I don't know. The first book that I finished, one of the books that I finished this week, was Imperiets Born at Reportage, which is a Swedish non-fiction book, very shortly only about this one. It's very interesting. It's a book about immigrants from post-Soviet countries to Sweden and what they do and what kind of mostly illegal networks they have. Many of these people are working and living illegally here in Sweden. They don't have a social security number. Their life is very difficult. Sometimes it has to do with criminal stuff, like starting from working without a work permit, working for low wages, working without social security, working in very dangerous building projects, stuff like that, because when something happens to you, then you're absolutely on your own. And there are also networks of Chechen, of Kazakhstan, Uzbek, Russian, Ukrainian people. It's very interesting because when you live in Stockholm like I do, and when you travel around, you always see these people, but you really don't know what they're doing. So, and how they live. I have asked myself very often how it is. So this book gives some answers to it. The author, Liza Alexandrova-Zorina, is a Russian journalist who came to Sweden. She was an activist in Russia, had to leave Russia a few years ago. She came to Sweden. Now she has researched this topic for the newspaper Expressen, but friends of her asked her, you should do a book about it. I think that half of the book is really good. That's the second part of the book. The first part is a bit loosely connected. I don't really understand how she puts the threads together there. But so I've read better stuff like This is London by Ben Judah, where he talks about the immigrant situation in London and how people live there and what kind of works they do and how society is looking at them. This one is good and interesting, and I finished it this week. A book that I really liked and that some of you did not like, I guess. I saw very different reviews on BookTube about this one. It's nominated for the Women's Prize of 2023. It was longlisted, not shortlisted. It is Children of Paradise by Camilla Grudova. I made a single review about this. This circles around a bunch of people who are working somewhere in the English-speaking world in a cinema, and the cinema is called Paradise. It has a life of its own. There's a lot of violence in the second part of the book. There is blood. There are all body fluids that you can imagine you will meet here in this book. You will meet semen, you will meet blood, you will meet saliva. So a lot of things happen here that might be difficult for some readers, so reader discretion is absolutely advised, but it has a lot of things to offer for people who love the movies and cinemas and directors and old movies from the 1940s until the 1980s and 90s. So Children of Paradise was a very good read. I also finished, this week, I finished a book that was longlisted for the National Book Award, I think 2 years ago. This is Shutter by Ramona Emerson. I remember that some people at the time who read the book at the time it was longlisted were really confused and surprised why this was nominated for the long list. It's a thriller, and I can understand today why some people were confused. I was really asking myself too now. It is an indigenous thriller, and that's what David Haska-Wambly-Wyden, who blurbs this book, has said. Of course, he liked it. And I also was interested, it also piqued my interest, and I wanted to read it because this is about a Native American Navajo photographer, a forensic member of the police force in Albuquerque, of the APD, the Albuquerque Police Department. She takes pictures of crime scenes, and she has this from childhood on, she has this capability that she can talk to the dead people, and dead people talk to her. They really come to her and talk to her. And there's a crime in the very beginning of that book that is described very detailed, body totally dismembered by an accident, but that woman was actually killed. And the ghost of this woman, I think her name is Irma, the ghost of this woman is haunting the protagonist of this story. She's called Rita, and she asks her to sort of follow up to find out who killed her. And of course, this woman, Rita, the photographer, gets in danger because the people who committed the murder realize that Rita can talk to the dead, that she knows something, that she knows more. And the book is written in two lines. The one line is the present, where all these crimes happen. The second line is, every second chapter is her childhood, her juvenile years, her education, living with her grandmother and her mother, coming to photography, coming to study, and living with that kind of capability, with that kind of to talk to the dead. I finished it, but if you see the channel, you know that I don't like to read many books or books that actually deal with supernatural stuff, with ghosts and stuff like that, because I don't believe in them, and not at all. And that's why I had some problems with this. I didn't enjoy it that much. I think if you like books where ghosts, where supernatural plays a role, then you really will like it. It's a very good character development by Ramona Emerson in this book, and that's, I think, the thing that held me to this novel until the end. But it's definitely not one of my favorite books. So this was the third one that I've actually finished. I started reading, we are in Misery May, I started reading this one. I took away the dust jacket in order to read it. This is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. I started reading this today. This is a very great book, again by Pulitzer Prize winner Matthew Desmond, who won the Pulitzer some years ago for his book also about poverty, Evicted, about profit and in the American city, where he followed a lot of evicted people in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. This one, Poverty by America, in this one, Matthew Desmond is trying to answer the question why such a rich country, which is probably the richest country in the history of the world, called the United States of America, at the same time has so many poor people. Let me just quote one paragraph. The beginning is already very, very impressive, I think. Poverty is the colostomy bag and wheelchair, the night terrors and bullets that maimed but didn't finish their cunning work. In Chicago, gun violence killed 722 people in 2020 and injured another 3,339. By some estimates, 8 and 10 gunshot victims nationwide survived the attack, often forced to live out their days in pain. The lives of the poor are often marked by violence, including violence experienced as children. Among a sample of men and women released from prison in Massachusetts, over 40% had witnessed a murder as children. Among a sample of parents who had been investigated by Child Protective Services in New Jersey, over 34% grew up with violence in their homes, and 17% were victims of sexual abuse. Poverty is traumatic, and since society isn't investing in its treatment, poor people often have their own ways of coping with their pain. My friend Scott was sexually abused as a child. As an adult, he found pills and fentanyl. He bought peace for $20 at a time. In his 40s, he got sober and stayed that way for several years before relapsing and dying alone in a hotel room. On top of the pain, poverty is instability. And this book tries to answer the question why poverty exists in America, and the conclusion, and that's no spoiler because this book is called Poverty by America. The reason is that the majority of Americans who are not poor profit from so many people being poor. Matthew Desmond, Read for Misery May, like some people call this month, as a readathon going on. The second book that I want to start now as an audiobook, because I will go and go to the gym and start a book there on the audio. This is a classical one from the shelves. It's Brick Lane by Monica Ali. I read 2 books by Monica Ali in the kitchen, and I read Love Marriage, which was published last year. I liked them both. And Brick Lane was her huge success, I think, about 20 years ago. It was written, and this is about a young woman in London, Nazneen's inauspicious entry to the world, an apparent stillbirth on the hard mud floor of a Bangladeshi village hut imbues her in her a sense of fatalism that she carries across continents when she's married off to Chanu. Her life in London's Tower Hamlets is on the surface calm. For years, keeping house and rearing children, she does what is expected of her. Yet Nazneen walks a tightrope stretched between her daughter's embarrassment and her husband's resentments. Chanu calls his elder daughter the little Mensa heap. I didn't ask to be born here, says Shahana with regular finality. This is beautifully rendered and by turns both comic and deeply moving, and Brick Lane established Monica Ali as one of British literature's most interesting voices. And this was blurred by the late Hilary Mantel. She said 20 years ago, entertaining and full of insight, talented, thoughtful, and mature. I can't wait to start listening to Monica Ali's Brick Lane. And I hope that you have a good week, that you had a good weekend, that you have great reading. Comments down below, please. Subscribe to the channel, and I see you very soon. Bye.